Hello, thank you for being with us, and we're going to take on an unusual trip back to the early days of radio and TV right here in the Akron area. And incidentally, this was suggested to me by Ray Pulliam, our esteemed videographer, director, chief honcho and everything as far as the show goes, and chief hollerer also if I don't get things right. So let's start with the first radio station in Akron was WADC. And that was started by an old gentleman out of West Virginia, believe it or not, Alan T. Simmons. And I worked for him for a while in my first radio job. And this is when I was trying to get my flying business started. I worked at everything when I was trying to get my flying business started. But this was a brochure put out by WADC commemorating 50 years, 1925 to 1955. And there's a real interesting story behind old Alan T. He was one tough guy. And here's a picture of the whole staff. And there's the guy on the right who has black hair. I had to look twice. I thought I always had white hair. But that's me right there. I was a sports director at the radio station WADC. In between trying to fly for a living, which was kind of tough in those days. But Alan T. Simmons came out of West Virginia to work in the rubber factories, the way thousands of other people did. And he didn't spend any useless money or wasteful money on getting a hotel room. He would go into the old Allen Theater, which was later named, it was named the Orpheum first, then it became the Allen after him after he bought it. He saved his money and he slept and lived in the theater. And Alan was an interesting guy, very intelligent man. You never showed him anything to read because he didn't like to read. He'd push it aside. He'd just say, "Tell me." And he became a multi-millionaire, and I'll tell you how in a moment. But Alan, when it came out of West Virginia, had a big family down there, and they had a horse farm. This story came to me from his brother. And I had to laugh, but it was really a sad story, and his brother laughed, so I laughed. Well, anyway, Alan T. came up here to Akron, and he took the black horses off the farm and he sold them. Now, the reason he took the black horses was that the Army would only buy black horses. They would not put their people, the soldiers, on a white horse because they could be shot real easy. So he left the family with all the white horses, and from then on there was a feud. And his brother said, boy, if he'd had a shotgun when he saw him. And Alan came here, and he started a taxi cab company. And then he heard about this newfangled stuff, radio, in 1925. And he started his own radio station, broadcasting from a garage down in downtown Akron, promoting his cab company. And the cab company grew and grew and grew, and Alan became moderately wealthy. And the cab drivers went on strike, so Alan just locked the doors, and he'd bought an airplane at that time, got his pilot. They flew out and stayed out until the guys got hungry and went back to work again. But that was the beginning of his radio station, and he started selling time on the radio on his programs as well. And later on, he built this big building, which was the corner of High Street and Main Street, South Main Street. It's gone now, but it was a plush building at that time. So Alan just prospered, and then he joined a little-known network, CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System. They were ready to go under. And Alan went to New York with a couple bushel baskets full of cash, and he bought stock. Instead of loaning the money, he just bought stock. And he became the largest individual holder in the CBS network. And he had that until he passed away years later. But Alan was kind of a tough guy to work for. And I never really worked for him. I was kind of an individual contractor. And I would buy the TV time, or radio time rather, getting ahead of myself, and I would go out and sell it to individual sponsors. And Alan loved that because he loved you if you could bring money in. His favorite color was green. But he gave me free rein there to sell whatever I could come up with. Well, I came up with the game of the week. High school football game of the week. I did the play-by-play on that. As I told you, I'm going to go through the history of Akron, so you got to pay attention. I may ask questions later. But we played I broadcast from the Rubber Bowl, wherever it was, the high school football game of the week on Friday night. And then also, I did a hunting and fishing show, and I knew nothing about hunting and fishing, but I faked it. And then at 11 o'clock, I did the horse racing results around the country. And I could never understand why people would listen to some guy reading the horse racing results. But he paid for it, and they paid for it. The sponsors had a show by Bowen Oil Company and sports show. And then also did a DJ and an interview show at various drive-in restaurants around town. And I would bring any acts that were in town out there and told them they'd make a deal with the owner and they'd get a free meal. And of course, any actors love free meals, so they'd all come out there. One time we had a cowboy troupe here and they brought 7 horses out there. And the cowboys rode around the place. And every place we had this program, we jammed the parking lot. We had sports cars, race cars, anything you could think of. And so that was my stint at WADC. But after a while, I branched out. My flying business started to get better, and I couldn't spend that much time at WADC. But in the meantime, started promoting races, stock car races at Barberton Speedway and at Canton Motor Speedway. And then also, it was coming up the end of the football season, and the classic McKinley-Massillon football game was going to be played. And I thought, well, I've never heard anybody broadcast that game, so I went over to the superintendent, and what I wanted to do was do a live radio show from down at the sidelines. He says, we've got 20 guys down there already. And he says, boy, I wish you had television? I says, let me see what I can do. So I went to Channel 5 in Cleveland. And Channel 5 they told me, this is a ridiculous idea. Why are you wasting our time? Who'd watch a high school football game? They would not. They would sell me the time. It cost me $3,500, which I didn't have. And they were going to bill me for the time. And I talked them into that. But they wouldn't even give me the time of day. They gave me 3 hours for $3,500. They would not even rent me a camera or a cameraman. I had to go to Youngstown and rent 2 cameras, 3 cameramen. And then when the word got out, I rented a room at the Canton Onesta Hotel, a suite rather, because I knew it was going to happen. As soon as everybody in the area found out they're going to telecast the Canton-McKinley-Massillon football game, I was mobbed by sponsors. I had them lined up, double lines. So I made a few bucks on that thing. That's a little bit of a side on the history of TV, starting with TV. And it was an interesting event because the minute the word got out, every sportscaster from Cleveland's big stations wanted on. And the top guy wanted $5,000. I kind of chuckled at that, was very polite, and declined him on that. The lowest price was $500. Then a guy by the name of, I've got a senior moment here. It wasn't Jack Graney, but I'll tell you in a moment, folks, once I can shuffle through my notes, remember the guy's name. But anyway, he was a big-time broadcaster out of Cleveland. And he offered to do the show for nothing because he got fired by the Indians and he wanted to get on with the Browns. They were just starting at that time. And so he offered to do it for nothing. We let him do the play-by-play and I did the color and announcements and all of that. So that was a very successful show. And Jimmy Dudley, that's the guy. It just came to me. He was the guy. And he was a big guy, big shot around here in radio and TV. And the other announcers that wanted $5,000 and $2,500 were gnashing their teeth because when that show went on, it was the most viewed sports show in Ohio up to that time. The Canton-McKinley and Massillon football game. It was terrific. And one thing as I look back on it, I didn't charge enough. We always seem to come up with that, don't we? We didn't charge enough. But anyway, everything was sold out on that show. And the sponsors were still trying. I didn't have any more time left, so we couldn't do that. And then once we got, I went from there, went over to WAKR. And WAKR wanted me to sell programs, because I did pretty well at WADC, but then Alan, who loved the buck, Alan T. Simmons, started to cut things back because I was making some good money selling his shows, which I dreamed up myself. And then I said, oh, the heck with this guy, I'm not going to argue with him. So I went over to WAKR and was selling time there for a while. And then my flying business really started to boom. And then WAKR, I quit there, WAKR, to run my flying business. I love flying more than I did talking on the radio and being on television. And finally the station manager and program manager called me up and says, come on, I want to talk to you about a show. Oh, okay, so go over there. And they wanted to do a flying traffic reporter and weather reporter from the air. I'd supply the airplane, I'd do the shows, 2 a day. I wound up doing it for something like 12 years, and I had another fellow to fill in when couldn't get back from flying. But it was the first weather and traffic show in the United States. And that was in 1958, and here is the ad. Well, WAKR really promoted that. Can you see that okay, folks? And you see that guy with the black hair there? I had to look to see who that was. So it was a lot of fun doing this show, and they promoted it, and I got paid to do it. I got free advertising, free promotion, and my flying business just prospered. It was a good deal all the way around. And I had a lot of fun doing this. I used this bigger. This was a rather complex airplane, retractable fast airplane, but it looked good on, they took a picture. I always used a smaller airplane, a Piper Cub or a Ronca, and because I could slow it down. And some of the instances I had or experiences I had with this airplane, after a while you go up, you can only say so much. And you get kind of bored flying around there, but they wanted a 15 or 20 minute report. Well, now, after a while, I said, well, I'm going to jazz it up. And so I started making things up. Now, folks, I think the statute of limitations is run, so you can't get me back on that one. But one of my favorite tricks was to fly north on the expressway, because I was into the wind and I could slow up and I'd go down to about maybe 50 to 60 miles an hour in this little Piper Cub or Ronca, and I'd look down. I said, oh my goodness, look at that guy in that red car. He must be doing 80 miles an hour. And I'd call on various cars. I thought it was funny. I thought nothing would happen. I did that about 3 times, and I got some threats. A couple of guys were going to come out to the airport and punch me out. They got the ticket. The cops waited until they heard this, watched for the red car, yellow car, and then ticketed these guys. So I was a very popular guy there for a while. And another instance I had, boredom. This was in March, and daylight saving time hadn't come in yet, so it was dark, but time people were still going to work. And March winds are usually, you've heard the Ides of March. March winds are pretty high, and you go up to about maybe 1,000 feet, then you can get at certain times. I'd wait till I get a wind about 50, 60 miles an hour up there, and I'd come over the city of Akron. I'd drop the flaps on this little airplane. I'd turn the lights out, the running lights, kind of illegal, but it was fun. It went over the Akron like this, and then flashed the landing light on, the navigation lights, and then pulled the nose up a little bit, and the airplane actually started going backwards. Now this actually could happen because we did it in the B-29 in the jet stream over Japan, a 250 mile an hour jet stream. That 160,000 pound airplane was going backwards. But it'll sink, but you still go backwards. And so I'd get up over Akron, and once again, statute of limitations, I was about 500 feet. And I pull the nose up, slow this airplane up, and start going backward with the lights on. And then I turn the lights off, make a quick, real fast turn, and then go full throttle and zoom over the Akron. Now I got the wind behind that, and turn around and repeat the process and stop right over downtown Akron. And after a while, I could see cars stopping and people pointing up. And that was a lot of fun until I got on the ground. The tower told me, call the tower when you land, call the police station when you land, call the radio station, WAKR, when you landed. Oh my, I'm really in trouble. So I said, what should I do when I see the first cop? Go ahead and put the cuffs on me? But the tower told me, don't ever do this again. Because at North High School, one teacher saw the airplane doing this on the way in. So he took all of his kids out of school down to the bridge and where they stopped. Had 2 or 3 teachers full of with cars. And he says, I had kids on the line, and this teacher would not let us off the line. He wanted every kid to tell on the telephone what they saw a UFO over downtown Akron. He said, you tied the whole thing up. The police station, I talked to the captain there, or the chief of police, and he said traffic was tied up. It was a very dangerous situation. If you do that again, and he didn't say what he's going to do. And the radio station, Roger Burke, who was the owner of the radio station, says, don't ever do that again. He says, we couldn't do any business here. We had people coming up here. We had the lines jammed. So that was my last attempt at being a UFO over downtown Akron. So as I said, I had a lot of fun. And also another thing was that I also gave the radar locations. And I'd call the police department, and they'd tell me where they're going to be. And so I'd go out and tell the people, slow down now, the police are here, they got a radar at these different, usually near a school. And finally, the chief of police shut me down. He told these guys, don't answer his questions. Don't tell him where he said, we're not catching anybody. Don't tell him where the locations are. I called in, the cop told me, I can't tell you. It's okay, no problem. I'll handle that. So I went up and gave about 8 to 10 different locations where the radar was. And you could see traffic slowing up all over the Akron area. And the chief called me. What are you doing? We only have 2 radar units and you're giving 8 to 12 of them around. Traffic is tied up, it's not moving. So I got my kicks out of doing that. As I said, I had a lot of fun doing it, but boy, every so often I got into some big trouble. But once again, folks, I'm confessing this, and don't try to pull the statute of limitations on it. Have not run, they've run. So as I said, I had a lot of fun. And I'm checking my notes here to see, because memory dims, as you go on. But as I mention these things, and then all comes back in a flood. And I thought maybe I should share these before I croak. And my kids throw all this stuff out. And then maybe you folks would be interested in hearing it. This was a kind of ad that WAKR used to run to promote this. And there's some of the old-time radio guys, Jack Fitzgibbons, who later became the deputy mayor of Akron. And he had a real deep voice. And he'd be on the 6 o'clock news. And he would go, this is Jack Fitzgibbons, I got it now, Jack Fitzgibbons with the news. And he'd hold it and drag it out. And Mr. Burke, who owned the station, called him out one day. He says, Jack, don't be such a pompous, I won't say the other word when you do this, just give them the news. The other guy was Bob Wiley, sports director at WAKR. He's a great guy, but you'd better not be standing in the hallways when he was rushing from the newsroom to the broadcast booth, because he'd knock you over. He would never, he'd just run. He always ran all day long. And he was famous, most famous, when doing a play-by-play football game at the Akron Rubber Bowl. when he claimed that a guy went to the 52-yard line. And there is no 52-yard line, as you sports fans know. And people never let him forget that. That was a lot of fun at WAKR. Then the station called me back in again, this time to talk about another deal, not to give me any more heck. They were kind of tired of jumping on me. So they wanted me to do a kids show. And we named it the Captain Ernie's Flying Club. And I brought an airplane into the studio, a little Cessna 120. We took the wings off, towed it in, put it in the studio, and then put it against the back wall, put the one wing on. And it was a kid show. And WAKR TV at that time was, then radio was up on Copley Road. It's a church now. And they had an auditorium there of about 300 seats. And we would mob that place with kids. They wanted to be on Captain Ernie's Flying Club show and sit in the airplane. And I'd give them a flying lesson, tell them what the controls were all about. And there's the photograph of, now we see this dark-haired guy in there again. And here's another one. And the kids would just flock, and they would have standing room only. And then I had the Civil Air Patrol in one time. And then each show, I got films like Shell Oil Company and some of the big aviation companies in Goodyear. And we'd have a flying lesson. And we'd let the kids sit in the airplane. We'd choose, and the kids would sit in the airplane. And they'd move the controls, and they just loved it. And we promoted the Goodyear, or WAKR really promoted the show. And then it got to be an albatross because the place was mobbed all the time, every Friday night when we had the show. And one time I got a phone call. And the guy said to me, is this Captain Ernie? Yes, sir. He says, is this a secure phone line? I said, well, it's secure if I pay my phone bill next week. So I thought that was kind of humorous, but the guy was very serious, very deep voice. And he says, I want to talk to you about a matter of great national importance, national security importance. I said, well, go ahead and talk. Oh, no, not on this line. I have to talk to you in person. And once again, you got to be discreet. Don't tell anybody. He said, I said, well, what is your name? He said, that's not important. I want to meet you someplace, private, where we can talk. I said, well, we can go to one of the hamburger joints. Oh, no, we'll meet at the bus station. I said, that's really a private place. So I go in to meet the guy, and he looks around, and he said, you've been followed? I said, well, no, I haven't been followed. I said, should I be? He said, no, and I want to know if you were followed, because this, once again, is national security. I said, well, now I'm starting to get a little worried. Am I going to get into something that I shouldn't be into? And the guy says, we have a problem with the Russians. I said, well, what can I do about the Russians? And he says, he looks around, he looks under the table, he says, I want to see if, not the table, but the seats. And I said, what are you looking for? I want to see if this seat is bugged. Oh boy, I'm talking to a real banana here. So the guy said, I thought I would call you because you've got this kid show and you can help us. I said, who's us? He said, never mind. And I said, okay, what's this about? And he said, do you know that the Russians are ahead of us in building model airplanes? I says, no kidding. That's awful. And I went along with the gag. I thought this guy was putting me on. What he wanted to do was have model airplanes on the TV show, the kids show. So once we got down to that point, I said, yeah, the guy, his name was Lionel Stevens. I can say it now because he died about 4 years ago. Turned out to be a nice guy, but a little bit on the left side. And so he had these model airplane clubs, and he would bring the kids in, and we'd have a model airplane contest. And that brought more kids in there. Finally, the station said, we got to do something about this. They're mobbing this place every Friday night. So my business, flying business, really got big. And I had started an airline and the whole shop. I we finally decided to give it up. But it was a very enjoyable part of my radio experience in Akron. Okay, then we went to, of course, the Captain Ernie's Flying Club. I mentioned that to you. And all the different, we had a lot of good guests on the place. I mentioned the Blue Angels, the Thunderbirds, the Golden Jumpers from the Army.
Golden Knights.
Golden Knights, that's it. See, that's why we brought you along, Ray, to remind me what I'm forgetting. And then doing that, and I don't know why I deserve this one, but doing the weather and the traffic from the air, being the first one in the United States, I was inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame. Thank God it was a Radio Hall of Fame and not the Hall of Fame in the county jail, for all the tricks I pulled up there. And anyway, it was the first one in the United States, and this is when I got the award at a banquet, and this guy was George Mammoth. He was the owner and a good friend of mine, owner and president of WCUE radio station. And unfortunately, he passed away here a few years ago. But when we finished the at WAD or WAKR with the traffic report, we did it for 2 years at WCUE, his station. And then I just got too busy to do the whole thing. So then when I started in radio in Akron here, there was WADC was the first radio station, and then WCUE came, or WHKK came in, and that was we called the Hillbilly Station. They played all mountain music. And then WCUE and WHK. And Mr. Burke started WAKR right around 1940, I believe. And the Beacon Journal was the dominant newspaper with the Akron Times-Press. And WADC had all the business, so he started WAKR. And he brought, what he did, he made a smart move. He brought the Beacon Journal in as part owner, a real minority owner. And so they paved the way for him. And of course, then WAKR became the dominant radio station here in the Akron area. And they're still in business, but the TV end, they bought out. The Burke family sold out, and the people that bought it dropped the TV. And when we went into TV, it was a UHF station, and there's probably a total of 4 TV sets that could pick up the station. It's a little exaggeration, but we had to go out, and WAKR had me get a crew of guys together and go out, and I'd have a whole bunch of converters in my car. And these guys would go right down the street in stores and try to sell these converters. That's the only way we kind of build up. And then when everybody got a set later on with UHF converters in it, or VHF, and they could pick up VHF. But until then, it was a tough going. So anyway, that's the story of radio and TV right here in Akron. And of course, I picked it up again by doing this show. The Ernie Stadvec show. It actually, Time Warner, Channel 14, they had this senior talk show on the Cleveland Akron Television Network. And the way I got into this, I was over at the fitness center working out, and some guy kept looking. And he goes over and he says, would you like to do a TV show? I said, oh, you're kidding me. I said, no, it's too much work. He said, no, I'm serious. He was the guy that was doing this show, the senior talk, but his health was failing. So I said, oh, okay, why not? So I went up to the station, made a deal, and I started doing the senior talk TV show. And I'd go out and get hold of sponsors, and it was fun, and we were getting sponsors, and I was getting interviewing interesting people and all that. And a man called me up, and he said, I'm interested in your show. Would you like to come over and talk about it? Well, that's usually unusual to have people call you up to do business. Usually you got to go out and find them. So I go into the guy's office. He's kind of half smiling. I would consider it now a smirk. And He said, oh, what's the name of your show? I said, it's Senior Talk. His Senior Talk, he says, what do you talk about, wheelchairs and crutches? I said, thank you, sir. I left, went back to the office and called the station, says, change the name of the show. No more Senior Talk. So then we progressed into it. Then Ray came on board with his tremendous amount of equipment he has. He keeps adding more all the time. He starts to explain it to me. Ray, just point the camera, okay? And I was going to say, if you ask Ray the time of day, he'll tell you how to build the watch. So anyway, we have a lot of fun doing it. We've been doing it for, what, 4 years now, Ray?
Yeah.
And nobody shot at us yet, but there's always the first time. So we hope to keep going on it and have many more years doing it. So thank you for being with us, folks. And that was your first lesson, and I think it's going to be the last right now about the history of radio and TV in Akron. If I tell you any more, you may turn me in, but once again, I think I'm protected. Bye, and we'll see you next time.